Hi, this is Skip Stewart, Vice President and Chief Improvement Officer with Baptist Memorial Healthcare. Once again, today we are honored to have Dr. Edgar Schein and Peter Schein. Welcome back, Dr. Schein and Peter.
Thanks, great to be here.
Well, I want to bring up a subject that's very, very popular in healthcare these days, and that's the subject of safety. Thankfully, there is a high focus on safety these days in healthcare. Some folks call it high reliability organization, and there's both the safety of the patient as well as the safety of the healthcare worker. And since we've talked in past videos about we live in this open socio-technical system that has all these interdependencies, therefore relationships are important, and therefore humble inquiry is a way to help build those relationships. I started thinking about that this weekend and thought to myself, well, if we're really focused on safety, if an organization is really focused on safety, then there will be intentional efforts to build relationships in these critical interdependencies, because out of those relationships come communication and come information. I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Well, Skip, the short answer is it is the safety field, which I've been interested in for 25 or 30 years, that led me to seeing the importance of relationships. That came out of safety, whether you're looking at nuclear industries or utilities or hospitals. The big accidents that we examine always reveal that people were not talking to each other, that somebody knew something that if that had been paid attention to, the accident or the death or whatever was the bad outcome might have been prevented. That was true of all the NASA disasters. It's true of most of the chemical disasters we hear about. And it is absolutely true that a handoff in a hospital that was badly handled because the doctor and the nurse had a poor relationship led to the wrong medicine for the patient who then died. It's always about relationships. And furthermore, I realized that the transactional traditional relationship, what we've called level one, not only provides no incentives for the subordinate to tell what he or she really knows. Worse than that, subordinates are often in a competitive relationship with each other. They withhold information to make somebody else look bad. So if safety is created by better communication, especially in the hierarchy, then I have reached the conclusion that from the very top, it has to be a level two relationship. If you don't have open, trusting communication, you will have safety problems sooner or later of one kind or another. So I'm dedicated to the idea that level two relationships are essential to safety, and that humble inquiry is, of course, one of the best ways to get to that level two relationship.
And I'll just add another little bit of context that, you know, in all of our Humble Leadership series books, which includes the new edition of Humble Inquiry, if there's any polarity that really is important for people to think about and to just, you know, keep in the back of their head, it's that distinction between transactional and personal. And the reason I want to emphasize that is Ed just mentioned it, but this distinction between transactional, personal, or level one, level two, the reason I want to emphasize it is that there is so much pressure still in sort of our management mythology, you know, the way we've done it for the last 50 or 75 years has so many kind of, you know, conventions and idioms that still really dominate behavior. So let's just take a couple examples. One is, you know, as Ed was talking about, we have this idea that if you see something, say something. But are we really free to do that? Because at the same time, we're told, in management training and, in sort of learning how to navigate our careers in management, whether it's healthcare, utilities, nuclear, software development, don't bring your manager a problem, bring them a solution, right? So we're told that. So that's going to inhibit us from sharing a problem, right? Because what if we don't have a solution? That means we're not going to say anything. Or stay in your lane, keep your head down, stay in your lane, stick to your knitting, do your job, right? All of those things sort of prevent us from sort of peeking up and looking around. And if we see something, again, we're supposed to stay in our lane and not say something, right? Or the other one that I love is, there's some big looming problem out there, but basically that's above my pay grade. And the funniest thing is when a CEO says, "Oh, well, that's above my pay grade." It's like, no, that's not. Nothing should be above anybody's pay grade if life and death is at stake, right? If there's a situation that's potentially life-threatening for a patient, then everybody has to say something. It doesn't matter where they sit in the organization. And, forget all those idioms about staying in your lane and not bringing a problem to your manager and it's above your pay grade. No, it's your obligation. Maybe that's what we're trying to get at, is that one of the ways that we get people really hooked on this idea of level 2 relationships is you create obligations to each other. You create expectations, you create a connection that goes beyond these roles that inhibit information sharing.
Really, really good. That's really good comments, Ed and Peter. Well, let me shift it a little bit and ask another question. One of the phrases that we've all used together when we speak, all three of us, is that life is a series of conversations, and everything happens through conversations and relationships. And as I've talked to people throughout the country, people will say, we need to do more asking questions and telling. Well, telling and questions are broad categories. I've even heard some people say, well, it's all about asking open-ended questions. But one of the things I love that both of you did in the second edition of Humble Inquiry, in the back of the book, you had these 12 mini case studies that kind of differentiated different types of inquiry. Humble inquiry versus diagnostic inquiry versus confrontive inquiry. And you kind of compared that to telling. Can both of you speak to those different types of inquiry and how this isn't really just about only asking open-ended questions?
Well, I'll start with the doctor-patient relationship, because that's where it's clearest in my mind. When the doctor has an appointment with the patient, and the patient is there waiting, and the doctor finally comes in, the doctor now has to decide how am I going to approach this? First of all, I'm not going to be a teller. I'm not going to pick up the chart and look at it and say, well, I see here, Mrs. So-and-so, that you've got this and this, so let's talk about that. That's the telling. He could say, well, how are we feeling today? Which is not an open-ended question, because the patient may not be conscious of his or her feelings. Or the doctor may say, well, I see that we've been working on getting your joints to feel a little bit less painful. What have you been doing about that? That looks like an open question, but it isn't. It's focusing the patient on what the doctor wants to know about. What is the patient doing? So what would be a really good humble inquiry question would be, well, good morning, Mrs. So-and-so. What's worrying you today? What is worrying you today? Or what's on your mind? Give that poor anxious patient an opportunity to tell what is truly on her mind or his mind, and not shape the conversation to whys or diagnostics or action. Try to create a climate, and this is the essence of the humble inquiry attitude. Try to create a climate where you really find out what's going on, because the patient may be there for blood pressure medicine, but it's really been worrying her that her foot hurts. And if the doctor isn't open, she may decide, well, I'm not going to tell the doctor about that because we're here for blood pressure. Humble inquiry is give the other person space to tell what's really on their mind and work from that. That would be the major way I would try to differentiate. Everything I've said are open-ended questions, but they all have different constraints associated with them. Humble inquiry has to be truly open. What's on your mind?
And I'll just add that I think we're very aware, though, that for most people in the medical profession, we think there's always that tension between that, humility that creates a real connection and really substantive information sharing, and the need to diagnose and provide service and provide medical help. And so I think it's that tension between I'm an MD, I'm a diagnostician, I can prescribe medications. All of those things are different forms of tell, right? And it's necessary. Most of the time, that's just entirely necessary. That's what you do. But there's also that can you find space to, in every encounter or every intervention, to ask questions that you don't know the answer to. Because, if you're looking at a chart of somebody's, condition, that's creating a frame around information gathering, right? That chart is leading you in a specific direction. So is there a way in the questions you ask to broaden that frame? Because the chart or the notes from the previous visit, whatever, those things again are putting are bounding your your information sphere with that around that patient. How can you expand it? That's what the idea of that simple idea of, are there questions that you could ask that you really don't know the answer to? And so that's what, something like, you really don't know what's worrying that patient that day. You might have an idea. They come in with a broken arm, and they're in pain. You have an idea what might be worrying them that day, but there's a lot of other stuff that might be going on. And is there a way to carve off some time to focus on some of that other stuff? Because that's where the really cryptic, potentially life-threatening stuff often is, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, really good, really good. So let's kind of shift now. Now let's tell some stories. And